On the 26th of July 1941, the German invasion of the Soviet Union was in full swing. Due to the advancing front lines, the Romanian port of Constanța was enjoying more and more safety from the Soviet air raids. Or at least, that's what they thought. Until suddenly, 4 Soviet fighter planes dived out of the sky, bombing the port's fuel refinery and oil depots. By the time the air defenses could react, black smoke filled the sky and the Soviet fighters were nowhere to be found. German high command was puzzled and army intelligence was ordered to find out how the Soviet fighters were able to get this far from any airbase with payloads that big. The answer? A top-secret project that had been under development since 1931 by aviation engineer Vladimir Vekmistrov, the Zveno composite aircraft. This is the story of the Soviet flying aircraft carrier. While designing airlifted gliders to use as target dummies, Vekmistrov came up with the idea of instead attaching manned fighters to bombers. This would free the bombers from the limited range of their escort fighters and allow them to safely reach strategic targets much deeper into enemy territory, carrying their escorts with them. He called it the Zveno aircraft. Red Army Chief of Armaments Tukhachevsky approved the concept and gave Vekmistrov a design team, kickstarting the development of his flying aircraft carrier. A few months later already, on the 3rd of December 1931, the Zveno 1 prototype made its first flight. It consisted of a Tupolev TB-1 mothership carrying 2 I-4 biplanes on its wings. While attached, the fighters drained fuel from the mothership so that upon detachment they would still have full fuel tanks left to perform their mission. Tukhachevsky was enthusiastic about this first test flight. "This is a great invention. The inventor should be given a bounty." And the bounty they got. All participants of the test received the Order of the Red Star and a motorcycle, and Vekmistrov himself even received a personal Ford automobile. In 1932, with the Zveno 2, the project received an upgrade with the new, massive 4-engined TB-3, the biggest bomber the world had ever seen. This would later allow for the attachment of 5 fighters at the same time. Getting the fighters up on the TB-3's wings proved to be labor-intensive though, so with the Zveno 3, Vekmistrov experimented with mounting the new IZ monowing fighter under the mothership's wings. Its high, fixed landing gear made it difficult to incorporate in the composite, and its use turned out to be a catastrophic mistake when the complicated system used to make it work failed mid-flight. The fighter plane got stuck to the mothership's wing due to aerodynamic suction and then made a fatal crash during the emergency landing, killing the test pilot. This tragic accident left a big impact on the team. Future designs would install a few safety features to help communication between the mothership pilot and the fighter pilots, such as signaling lights and periscopes, to provide the mothership pilot with vision under its wings. The project hit another milestone on the 23rd of March 1935 with the Zveno 5, when they performed the world's first in-flight docking of 2 fixed-wing aircraft. The option of redocking opened up a slew of new possibilities for the project, like a mothership supporting up to 8 fighter planes by docking and refueling them interchangeably. With the first mid-flight docking a success, Vekmistrov's confidence in one of his side projects grew. A dedicated fighter to be used with motherships exclusively, the IZW. Having smaller wings and no landing gear, it would have only been able to lift off and land using a mothership, but in turn, the weight this saved would cause it to outspeed its production model by 200 km per hour. However, when Tukhachevsky pitched the idea of a superspeed airborne fighter to Stalin, his irritated response was, "What sort of fantasies are you reporting to us?" And with those words, the project was quietly abandoned. In August 1935, the Zveno 6 welcomed the brand new I-16 fighter to the project, and it proved to be a godsend. A low monowing with retractable landing gear, perfect for suspension under the wings of the mothership. On the 20th of November 1935, Project really cemented its nickname at the test facility, Vachmistrov's Circus. A TB-3 mothership took off, carrying 4 fighter planes at the same time, and a 5th plane docked to it mid-flight. Vachmistrov called it Avia Matka, the Air Mother. Now, Vachmistrov wanted to push the project to its extreme, using giant flying wings designed by Boris Cheranovsky, carrying whole squadrons of fighters at the same time. Construction was to begin immediately, but then Tukhachevsky again pitched the idea to Stalin, who responded, "Comrade Tukhachevsky, you are a very good marshal, but also a great dreamer." The project was cancelled the next day and the unfinished craft destroyed. By now, a funny mustache man loomed over the Soviet Union and he would not spare the Zveno project. Stalin's Great Purge happened in 1937 in an attempt to rid the Soviet Union of his real and perceived political opponents. Unpatriotic elements. Marshal Tukhachevsky and Air Force Chief Elksnis, two major supporters of the Zveno project, as well as Vachmistrov himself, all became victims of the Great Purge in 1937. But Vachmistrov, being an important designer, survived to tell the tale, getting away with just a demotion and a few years of Shereshka. Pretty much a 5-star gulag where designers could still continue their work. There he'd also encountered Topulev, the designer of the TB-3, who also shared this fate. Up to now, none of the Zveno designs actually made it into service, but Vachmistrov persevered, and in 1938 he finally settled on the final configuration that would enter service, the Zveno SPB, the Combined Dive Bomber. Throughout all his iterations, it became clear mounting fighters on top of the wings was just too impractical, taking at least 12 men to pull the planes onto the wings. What the Soviet Union really needed was a dive bomber, and this new setup fulfilled that niche. This new configuration had the TB-3 bomber carrying 2 I-16s under its wings. The I-16s each carried a pair of 250 kg bombs. They were not even able to lift off on their own with this extreme payload, so the mothership not only increased the range of the dive bombers, but also functioned as an airlift. The mission profile for the Zveno SPBs was to take the I-16s to a strategic target where they are decoupled and the mothership returns to base. The fighters would proceed to dive bomb the target, after which they are to return to base on their own. Due to convincing test results in 1938, surprising observers with the accuracy of their dive bombings, the Zveno was finally accepted into service. Not as a bomber escort like Vachmistrov had originally envisioned, but as dive bombers. After being accepted, the interest in the Zveno declined quickly, however, and of the initial order of 40 Zveno configurations, in the end, only a small squadron of 3 entered service in 1940 at the Black Sea Fleet Air Force Base of Yevpatoria on the Crimean Peninsula. There they were under command of Captain Arseny Shubikov. But even now, the commander of the fleet saw no use in the weird and obsolete contraptions of Shubikov's circus and ordered the dismantling of the Zvenos in January 1941, leaving them to collect dust in a hangar. 5 months passed, and again, a funny mustache man was threatening the Soviet Union. Germany declared war on the Soviet Union and launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest land offensive the world had ever seen. Just like its army on land, the Soviet Air Force was struggling to compete with the Luftwaffe, and they needed every edge they could get. When the second-in-command of the Soviet Navy, Commissar Ivan Rogov, made a routine visit to the airbase, Captain Shubikov was able to get a hold of him and remind him of the Zveno dive bombers. The Commissar was desperate and proceeded to show Shubikov a map, pointing at Chernavoda, a bridge over the Danube in Romania. "Can you get over there?" he asked. Shubikov did some quick maths and answered confidently. "If we could suspend a 95-liter tank, we can fly to Chernavoda too. As for the time being, we can go to Constanza and the bombing will be exact. I'll bet my life." The Commissar pulled some strings, and a few days later, on the 22nd of July, Moscow ordered the Zveno dive bombers to be made operational again. Vagmistrov heard about the reactivation and rushed to the Black Sea airbase himself to help with reassembly of his babies. He even brought new designs for external fuel tanks that would later allow them to reach the Chernavoda Bridge. Their first mission was executed on the 26th of July 1941. Their target was the oil depots of Constanța on the Romanian coast. In broad daylight, two motherships brought their I-16 fighters to a distance of 35 kilometers off the shore, where they detached. As nobody expected the Soviet fighters so far from any airbase, the patrolling Messerschmitts didn't even notice the I-16s making a flyover. Above the oil reservoir, Shubikov initiated the dive at an altitude of 2,000 meters, pointing almost straight down. The rest followed him one after another, dropping their bombs at an altitude of 800 meters. The giant explosions finally alerted the air defenses, but it was already too late, and Shubikov's squadron made it back to Odessa Air Base intact. The first of many flying aircraft carrier raids in history was a success. Their next target, however, would be a tougher nut to crack. The King Carol Bridge at Chernavoda. The largest bridge in Europe at the time, was the only crossing over the Danube in the area and carried a fuel pipeline responsible for 28% of Romania's fuel export. It had eluded conventional bombings for the whole war now, and with the front line progressing further and further each day, time was running out for the Soviet Air Force to deal with it. When Vagmistrov finally completed the external fuel tanks, the raid on Chernavoda Bridge became possible and took place on August 10, 1941. A stream of DB-3 bombers had bombed the bridge continuously all night, trying to saturate the Romanian air defenses for the real strike. The real strike, carried out at dawn by two Zveno composites, followed by 6 PE-2s, still without dive bombing gear, decoupled from the motherships 15 km off the Romanian shore. Captain Shubikov led the 4 I-16s 2,000 meters above the swamps of the Danube mouth until at 5:30 the bridge became visible in the distance. The second Shubikov initiated the dive. Flags started firing, bursting all around the plains. They dropped their bombs at an altitude of 600 meters and turned away to strafe the flag guns. Everyone returned to Odessa safely, and all of the involved pilots reported hitting the bridge. But photographs taken showed that although the bridge took 3 payloads and the pipeline was hit and set on fire, the bridge was still mostly functional. Stalin was informed and his orders were clear: repeat the operation immediately, destroy the bridge. The raid would be repeated on the night of August 13th. Destruction of the bridge was absolutely critical to halting the advance of the German army, which was made clear by the amount of high brass present on the briefing of the mission. The raid arrived at the shore of Romania at 5:40. They decoupled, already under fire of anti-air guns, but proceeded to the bridge as usual. Diving over the bridge, they released their bombs much later this time, at an altitude of 300 meters, resulting in 5 direct hits on the bridge. Again, they were under heavy fire, but again, they managed to all arrive back at Odessa, which was currently already under siege by the German army. Intelligence confirmed the success of the mission. 1 truss of the bridge and the oil pipeline had been destroyed. German fuel transport had to be diverted to the railroad, and a congestion of tankers could be seen in a nearby port. In Berlin, Hitler was worried and instructed the most urgent liquidation of Russian air bases on the Black Sea coast. 4 days later, on August 17th, Shubikov's circus repeated the raid on the port of Constanța, this time targeting the floating docks harboring destroyers. Anti-air defenses had been strengthened, and lacking the element of surprise, they didn't manage to score any direct hits. On the way back, they got intercepted by Bf-109s, and only 2 I-16s managed to escape. These were the first casualties of Shubikov's squadron. Meanwhile, deep in Ukraine, the Germans had crossed the Dnieper River and managed to secure an important bridge at Zaporozhye. The Southern Front had great difficulty taking out this bridge from the air, and the Black Sea Fleet eventually recommended them Shubikov's squadron, the bridge specialists. On August 20th, 2 Zveno aircraft took off, but this time headed to the northeast, Ukraine. Along the way, they met up with a regiment of 24 I-16s to escort them to the bridge. The Zveno dive bombers showed off their deadly accuracy again, scoring 5 hits of the 8 bombs dropped. The top railroad of the 2-story bridge had been completely destroyed, not getting repaired until 1943 when it was already too late. Later, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein would write in his memoirs that he considered the destruction of the bridge one of the main reasons for the Stalingrad catastrophe and the failure of the German Southern Front as a whole, since it left the Germans with only one crossing over the Dnieper River. By now, the Red Army had been pushed back to the Crimea, and most of the sorties done by Shubikov's squadron were as conventional fighters by this point, reaching 5 to 6 sorties a day in a desperate attempt to defend the Crimean airspace. Regarded as bridge specialists, they were still used as dive bombers to destroy pontoon bridges now and then, but October 22nd finally spelled the end of the Zveno composite operational history. On this day, the Zveno dive bombers were ordered to perform a bombing run without fighter escorts. Captain Shubikov wouldn't have any of it and decided to escort his comrades himself. He launched in an I-16 and escorted the Zvenos to their targets and covered their retreat, but never arrived back at the airbase himself. A few days later, Crimea would fall to the German army, and the local air force evacuated to the Caucasus, rendering the Zveno composite unoperational. In their brief operational history, the Zveno composites made 29 sorties, dropping 116 bombs with an accuracy sometimes reaching up to 85%, primarily on the houses of those of you that did not like and subscribe yet. 3 I-16 fighters and their pilots were lost in these sorties, including Captain Arseny Shubikov. As for Vagmistrov, he continued designing composites and gliders. Notably, he assisted Polikarpov in designing the BDP-2 troop transport glider, which also saw use in the war. The Zveno flying aircraft carrier remained his greatest achievement though. Even though his dream of bomber streams carrying their own escort fighters to battle did not become a reality, pivoting his concept to a dive bomber system ensured his hard work finally got accepted into service. It enabled the destruction of important bridges, causing logistical nightmares for the Germans that even ended up affecting the outcome of the Battle of Stalingrad.